I wanted to make this video to break down solar geoengineering, also known as chemtrails. Whatever you call it, the idea is that chemicals are being sprayed from airplanes to affect our world. For those that are new to the subject or on the fence, I think it is helpful to break down the subject into three sections. First, are chemtrails even possible? Second, what proof is there of chemtrails? And finally, if there are chemtrails, why has no one said anything about them? David Keith seems to be the person as a spokesman for geoengineering. Here's a video from a presentation by whistleblower Kristen Megan explaining who David Keith is.
As it was presented to you, I'm here to speak to you about geoengineering. I want to show you a video clip because the first thing people ask me about geoengineering is, who are these people? Who are the people that are, kind of pushing the button to get this thing going? One of them, his name is David Keith. And David Keith has been low in the radar for a while. But he has written a book about climate engineering that has basically done more for the truth movement of this than anything. Because he is the frontline person that is the #1 advocate for geoengineering. And I want to show you a clip. It's about 6 minutes, so just bear with me.
You ever look at those planes up there? They have contrails on them.
Maybe all those planes are the contrails. Maybe they're actually spraying chemicals into the atmosphere right now, and Uncle Sam isn't telling us.
Seems extremely unlikely.
That the United States is not telling something to its citizens? That seems extremely likely to me. Read the newspaper.
And of course, there are a lot of problems with what they're proposing. It turns out plants need sunlight.
Yes.
Have you gotten some grief for suggesting this?
Sure. I mean, this is like writing a book as the case for leprosy.
Well, first of all, let me ask you this question, because there's a rumor, I don't know if this is true or not, that some scientists are trying to figure out a way to block the sun to try to slow down global warming.
An individual start this?
In practice, only a country. A big country.
What about a man in like a hollowed out volcano with henchmen who occasionally shakes his fist at the sky and says, "They said I was a fool at Harvard. Who's the fool now?"
It's All Things Considered from NPR West. I'm Arun Roth. If scientists get the calculations wrong, it could be catastrophic for life on Earth. Or what if the technology got into the wrong hands? Couldn't someone shoot poison into the atmosphere?
So people are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions.
Right, and also that it's sulfuric acid.
It
If
is.
you're bearing the lead, is there any possible way this could come back to bite us in the ass?
You put another kind of pollution, sulfur dioxide, up to orbit, cover the atmosphere. The sky won't be really blue in the way it is now anymore.
Blanketing the earth in sulfuric acid, because I'm all for it. This is the all-chocolate dinner. I still get to have my CO2, and I just need to spray sulfuric acid.
Right?
All over the earth.
Right. We put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide.
Okay, and that's good or bad?
It's terrible.
But it'll be better if we put more in. So if it kills 1 million people and we're only doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math. So killing people is not the objective here.
Killing people, not the objective. I just wanted to be clear. I just wanted to be clear.
This is the kind of stuff I wake up sweating about. Exactly.
Well, it's your idea.
No, it actually turns out to be an old idea. This was known since President Johnson, and the scientific community mostly decided not to talk about it.
What happens to the sulfuric acid after it's sprayed? Does it just stay up there?
No, it rains down.
Okay.
But as I said, it rains down.
Okay.
It's a tiny addition.
Okay.
And you'd put, say, 20,000 tons of sulfuric acid into the stratosphere every year, and each year you have to put a little more, and this doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in emissions.
We'll get to it eventually,
But it does.
But in the meantime, we're shrouding the earth in sulfuric acid.
Here's a clip of a presentation by David Keith explaining how planes can be fitted to drop chemicals and how, at least in principle, it is very easy to geoengineer.
The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. So it's certainly in principle possible to do that. There's a big literature that's already looked at that. And you could do that by either building new versions of these aircraft or even re-engineering existing aircraft. So there's some ideas of that. So you go to an engineering firm and you want this done. They don't say this is hard or unusual. They say, okay, yes, we could do it. Aerosol geoengineering looks like it is so cheap that the cost is basically not going to be an issue. That means that implementation decisions will be risk-to-risk decisions. the risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it. And it makes the problem of how we govern it fundamentally harder and different and novel. So I've told you that it's cheap to deliver materials to the stratosphere, and I'm convinced that's true. I don't think that will change. But I think the more we do research, the less easy this will look, the more complicated the environmental effects will look. And that's a good thing, because right now it looks too easy. So I think that if we do more research, we're likely to find out that it's harder and more complicated than we thought, and that the side effects are harder to manage, and that's a healthy outcome that will make it easier to do the management. Of course, the opposite reaction is possible. It's an empirical question, how people will actually react to knowledge about this. Another reaction is to say, if these crazy scientists are so concerned about putting CO2 in the atmosphere, they want to think about these things, then that might actually mean we should be more serious about the risks of CO2 in the atmosphere. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids.
Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere, in particular small particles and aluminum?
So the collaborators of mine working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie Mellon who've focused on human health impacts. And while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation in level pencil and paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you're just thinking about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at with some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
So 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere would have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. We're to separate out the toxicological. So the alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing. The alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing.
Dane looked at him and he said, so you're telling me that spraying 10 to 20 megatons of aluminum, as you said, would have no human health effects? He took a deep breath and he swallowed and he said, let me be more careful here.
We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
And that, for me, that was the whole main point of what is going to be coming out to the public. It's the damaging effects of aluminum that are being found around the world in massive amounts. Here's David Keith confronted on this very issue, and he looked, you know, at that point like they just let the cat out of the bag.
Mm-hmm. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
They're proceeding because they have an agenda that's separate from trying to thwart this crisis of global warming. You know, there's obviously several other objectives, whether it's depopulation, control, weapons aspects, communications aspects, all kinds of things, you know, wild cards.
The next video is from Harvard University talking about geoengineering, how it is possible and why it might need to be done.
One aspect of the climate problem that people sometimes don't appreciate is the timescale. The fact that a large fraction of the carbon we're putting in the atmosphere will still be there thousands, even tens of thousands of years from now. But another part of the timescale of climate change is the timescale of the energy systems on which our society is built. Switching our energy system from a fossil fuel-based one like it is today to a non-fossil energy system would take, at the very least, many, many decades, and probably much more than a century, and tens of trillions of dollars, and that's just for the US alone. The numbers are just staggering. Many of us who have looked at the energy systems of the world and the climate system have a feeling that we may actually not be able to switch our energy system over in time to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. And this is really why solar geoengineering, I think, is an important thing to look at very carefully.
Solar geoengineering refers to a set of technologies that could allow humanity to deliberately increase the planet's reflectivity, reflecting away some sunlight, and so partially offsetting the temperature changes and other climate changes that come from the accumulation of carbon dioxide. This is not a substitute for cutting emissions. If we want a stable climate, in the end, we must bring emissions to zero. But it is a powerful supplement. It could reduce the risks of climate change in ways that we cannot reduce them by simply cutting emissions. It could allow us to reduce temperature extremes, extremes that cause real human suffering, deaths from heat waves, losses of crops that will cause real damage in the poorest parts of the world. It reduces the extreme precipitation events. These are the big storms that are some of the most dangerous things about climate change. So the benefits of solar geoengineering in the form of reduced climate risk, reduced crop loss, reduced sea level rise, might amount to something like 1% of global GDP. And surprisingly, solar geoengineering can be very inexpensive. The cost might be something like $10 billion for the whole planet. That sounds like a lot of money each year, but in fact that's something like 1/10,000th of global GDP. So the benefits might be 1,000 times larger than the costs, which is just stunning. And that's why we need a research program.
It turns out there is no government funding at the moment for solar geoengineering, practically none. We have the National Academy of Sciences recommending to proceed with research on solar geoengineering. NGOs, Environmental Defense Fund, where I just spent the better part of a decade, is recommending careful research as well. And none of it is happening.
One of the reasons that people are so hesitant to have solar geoengineering is they think that that will lead us to do less in terms of curbing greenhouse gases. Countries have not been very aggressive in stepping forward in controlling these greenhouse gases. But let's assume that I even thought that this would affect things 1% in terms of the greenhouse gases that were reduced. I would still go ahead with solar geoengineering because I think that we're on a very unpleasant course and we have to do something about it. Solar geoengineering is the most promising technology that we have today.
Solar geoengineering as a public problem brings together many of the ingredients that brought me into the research world in the first place. I'm interested in environmental problems because they're a site of innovation. They're a place where society comes to grips with the fact that we're not human beings alone. We live in a planet that has an environment and we're integrated into it. So here we have one of the most urgent environmental problems confronting humanity, and we're saying that 190 plus countries, we are going to do a set of technologies that will alter the planet in order to make it safer. But we have not devoted attention to the institutional structures that are now needed in order to respond to the challenges. We have to have global buy-in.
One of the main reasons that it's critical to start this research right now is that there are risks that are associated with the introduction of aerosols in the stratosphere. The risks are well known for sulfates aerosols as they exist naturally in the atmosphere and they get into the stratosphere from volcanic eruptions. These aerosols are known to have the potential to deplete ozone and change the temperature of the stratosphere, which has a number of effects. Because of these risks that we know about, we're very interested in exploring new materials that have the potential to greatly decrease these risks compared to sulfate. There's a number of materials that people have thought about, such as diamonds or calcite, titania, but as these are new materials for the stratosphere, we actually don't really know their reactivity. Hence, it is critical that we conduct experiments. We need to find out and try to quantify aspects as soon as possible. Because the worst scenario we want to be in is that in 10, 20 years down the road, we find ourselves in a situation where we say the rate of change from climate change is so big that the cost to humans and the environment is unacceptable, and we are starting to be forced in a situation to do something to try and slow the rate of change. And the last situation we want to be in is to then make an uninformed decision and have wasted 20 years or 10 years or whatever time of potential to try and do research and get to a better understanding and a better quantification of risk, and also have more time to actually try and look for the ideal material to do this.
To me, solar geoengineering is terrifying. We're talking about an engineering project that would affect every living thing on this planet. The possibility that something could go wrong is really scary. And of course, the question of who controls it and to what level do you actually set the thermostat? These are very deep, fundamental questions, and we don't have answers to them. And yet, as scary as that is, as uncertain as some of the impacts of solar geoengineering may be, I think the evidence is clearer and clearer that not doing solar geoengineering and letting climate change proceed may be actually worse as an alternative. And therefore, I think we have to take a very hard look at solar geoengineering and its use in the future.
Solar geoengineering doesn't get us out of the need to cut emissions. In the end, if we want a stable, safe climate, we have to bring global emissions to zero. But the combination of solar geoengineering and emissions cuts can get us climate benefits that you can't get with emissions cuts alone. Whatever your views, our children will face decisions about what to do with climate risk, decisions that will inevitably involve the possibility of doing solar geoengineering. If we have no research program, then what we give them is the gift of ignorance. We need a diverse, systematic effort to figure out how solar geoengineering might work. That effort should be non-commercial, open access, and it must be international. Moreover, this is a problem where a multidisciplinary approach is absolutely vital. We need engineering and science, but unless it's embedded in a larger universe that thinks about governance, thinks about business, thinks about ethics, and even the way this fits in our environmental literature, we won't be able to do something that really helps the world ultimately make decisions about it. We need a research program that thinks about how to reduce the technical risks by figuring out better science and technology, and how to build institutions that have a better chance of governing a technology like this in a divided world.
This clip is from CIA Director John Brennan's speech about chemtrails.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives. Now, I could go on and on and on and on about the things that fascinate me, but rather than talk about them, I thought I'd stop here.
Now that we have seen that it's possible to geoengineer, let us see if there are any evidence that the military is spraying anything in the air. Here are several videos of meteorologists showing from their radars that the military is indeed spraying something.
Mostly cloudy skies, so we have the clouds out there, but not the rain. Well, if you're looking at the radar picture, you're probably saying, well, we have some blue on the radar here. What's that all about if it's not raining out there? Well, believe it or not, this is actually not rain. This is called chaff. This is something that the military actually let out of their aircraft a couple of hours ago. It can be plastic, it can be aluminum, and basically it's something that they emit from the aircraft in order to confuse radar, and it's used in times of war, obviously, but obviously just an experiment here over the Fort Myers area. And this is rain. This is all man-made material. No known harm to any humans, but nonetheless, just wanted to show you that on the radar picture. And if nothing else, it's actually a great thing that the military has that as an option. Now, looking at the radar picture, we have technology that can erase all of that man-made material and show you only the rain.
On this Thursday, we had a little cloud cover in the morning hours, a couple of showers as well. A bit of an unusual situation. Now, this first portion of the radar cycle, fairly bland and typical, but then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic, or even metallicized paper products. Obviously, they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
Only Mother Nature can change the weather, but we can modify it a bit through cloud seeding. How does it work and why do we do it?
Basically, in the atmosphere, there's liquid water that flows by. In a wintertime storm system, there's a lot of solid called supercool liquid water that passes over top of the mountain. By introducing silver iodide to the cloud, it's an ice nuclei. And what this does is it teaches the water how to freeze. Once it comes in contact with the supercool liquid water, it actually starts a ice crystal growth or a snowflake. By introducing more of these into the cloud, you get more snowflakes and therefore more snow.
Idaho Power has 26 cloud seeding generators, 11 in the Payette region and 15 in eastern Idaho.
This is the radar imagery over the past 3 hours, and this is from more than likely military exercises going on in a designated area off the coast of Key West now. What they do is they sometimes throw some materials in the air that are supposedly non-toxic, and it does show up on the radar. What they use it for is deflecting radar beams for disguising themselves, usually ships or aircraft in this case. And you can see that this is just not a rain pattern that you would normally expect with a frontal system. Now, the visible satellite imagery will confirm that. We look down there for any kind of clouds, and you don't see any out there. So obviously not rain, false echoes from that. Again, more than likely military exercises going on down off the coast of the Key West area. Water vapor imagery showing the dry air in place now all across the
last weather segment. This is inevitably military or something going on. The government, the Air Force, they send out what's known as chaff, and it's a way to experiment with the radar systems. And when you see this kind of a pattern like this, you can rest assured there's something going on. They're actually little bitty magnetic and little bitty strips of, whether it's aluminum, you know, they change it, but what happens is the radar deflects off of all these little pieces, and they use it actually as a jamming mechanism for radar in warfare, but it can also jam our radar and make rain appear that there really is no rain out there.
Good evening. Well, another beautiful sunny day today, although fog did linger in a few places. But during the afternoon now, high cloud or so-called contrails built up. This line of wispy clouds produced by the condensation trails from really artificial clouds produced by the exhaust fumes from aircraft engines. And we do have quite a lot of those in the sky tonight, but generally settled, calm conditions due to this area of high pressure sitting right over Ireland, and still high pressure.
Sometimes, occasionally, the military will put some substances into the atmosphere that are detected by our radar, our weather surveillance radar. It's a substance that's called chaff.
The chaffs do look similar to the oncoming storm system, but they're actually an indication of an aircraft. We replayed the radar images from 8:40 a.m. Turns out several of those chaffs or planes were near the San Diego and Baja areas. Depending on how low and how fast, the planes could have created that sonic boom.
Let's talk about military chaff. You may or may not have heard of this. Now, chaff is something that the aircraft are equipped with. It's a spray that they put out in the atmosphere to confuse ground radars. It's a protection against, say, the radar-guided missiles, okay? So when they're flying these test patterns, they'll chaff the sky, and it shows up on radars. Now, I was looking at my radar wondering, could it have been a flight pattern? Well, here's what happened. I called the National Weather Service, and something interesting here. They confirmed that this right here, this and this are not rain. That was not rain on our radar. So this is not rain. What is it? Could it have been chaff? Well, we may never know.
But we've been dealing a lot with some military activity in terms of chaff anyway, and that's something that I experienced for the first time yesterday. That was a whole lot of fun. And that's where the military just basically dumps some of the tiny particles of plastic or metal mylar into the atmosphere. And basically they do this when we do already have weather in the area, because it's been around since as long as radar has been around, because that's the shot from yesterday's 6 o'clock show. What they do is try to confuse ground-based Doppler radar systems, and as Mark put it so kindly, ground-based meteorologists. And yes, ladies and gentlemen of the armed forces, it worked well. That's a shot of the mylar. That's a shot of the chaff, again, moving through the atmosphere yesterday. As you can see, a very distinctly different pattern from when a storm system would move through.
Now let's turn our attention to the video evidence of planes spraying chemicals.
There is a growing citizens movement demanding an explanation of chemtrails.
And I talked to my NSA buddies at Fort Carson, Peterson Air Force Base, and Buckley, where I was actually their doctor taking care of the pilots flying and spraying the chemtrails. So I know it's real. If anybody says it's not real, they're full of it.
It's not the same as conducting some localized test for some defensive project. This is open air operations. It's not a test. This thing is in place.
It didn't start until about 1996. Exactly. And, growing up my whole life, a condensation trail disappeared, the 20 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. And now it can be in the summer at like 4,000 feet, and there's these big clouds behind jets. Some jets leave it behind, leave a trail behind them. Other jets at the same flight level, same altitude don't. And, instead of just getting into are they spraying us or what's changed in the jet fuel or what's changed in the atmosphere, there are tens of thousands of declassified admissions under different programs where different Pentagon programs, different agencies of the government have tested chemical, biological, and radiological agents on the American people.
Talking about this a few years ago was extremely dangerous. Now that we have YouTube and more social networking devices, such as even Rupert's MySpace, this is really getting out in such a way that they can't control it. They must just be really, if you could use the expression, shitting themselves over this, because they can't control people now talking about the elephant in the room, what is so obvious to all of us.
There's a feeling from that area that the state doing all of these weather modification programs might not be doing it for the benefit of the citizens of Texas and other states that they may impact as well.
Well, many of the planes that we're seeing here in Abilene will actually turn whatever they're spraying on and off right before our eyes. I mean, you'll see a plane up there flying like normal, and then all of a sudden it starts spraying. We've seen them fly off into the distance and then loop around and fly back again. These are not your typical planes with a preordained path destination from city to city. Someone needs to explain to me why do they stop traveling in one particular direction and then loop around and come back again. They perform this behavior so many times that we start seeing the tic-tac-toe grids in the sky. we're witnessing the giant X's. And I mean, Rosalind, when you and I grew up, these contrails naturally dissipated in a few seconds or perhaps a minute max. But these things expand, they grow bigger, and before you know it, the entire sky is overcast.
That's correct. And they are there all day. They do loop the loop around our county and our state. We follow them at times with spotters in different areas, watching the planes loop, come back around. And we know from the FAA records that the jets from commercial airlines fly in straight lines. And coming across our county, there aren't many, and they stay mostly in certain patterns. The jets that we see leaving the persistent jet contrails move in directions that normal jets wouldn't fly because it would use too much fuel and put them off schedule. And the jets that we see here do loops. We've got pictures of them looping the same X's and crosshatches. But I believe that some of that, not only are they looking for keeping something in the air almost all the time, but we feel that some of the markings are to mark the start and stop areas for their programs so that they can watch their experiments either from satellite or the ground.
The sky has been blue like this all over London. And it's about 4:30 now, and these planes have left all these lines in the sky that are just spreading out into thicker clouds. You can see that one's got quite an abrupt beginning. So basically today Richie in Boston was talking about how they're putting a solar screen in the sky to save us from global warming. And here in London it was quite, like I said, it's just been blue all day. It's been really beautiful. I'll show you. It's just been like that and like this. So over in the east it's a different story, and here comes another plane. I can see it just in time. So we've got one over here in the bottom left that's quite new. You can see that line. And then we've got all the others, but check this one out. He is really going for it. Yeah, he's really going for it, guys. Look at that. So they're just talking about geoengineering the sky. To cool the planet. But they've been doing it for a long time. Yeah. Yeah, the clouds, the aeroplanes leaving the trails. Because, yeah.
We come inside.
Sorry?
Let's become there. Let's become here.
Oh, you want to be in the picture?
No, joking.
Yeah, I'm just, because these aeroplanes, they leave the trails in the sky that make clouds, you see.
Okay.
So I record it because...
What do you do then?
I put it on YouTube. Just as a record, because the aeroplanes, they shouldn't be leaving such clouds in the sky. The fuel, maybe the fuel's been changed and it's got more metal in it, because they don't disappear, and all that whiteness is from aeroplanes, but yet we have a beautiful blue day. Yeah.
So what you do then?
So in a way I'm just recording the event, because some people think that, and I believe as well, that this is purposely done. It's called geoengineering. and they're talking about saving us from climate change and global warming by making a cloud in the sky to reflect the sun. And they have these ideas how to cool the planet, and it's called geoengineering. So, yeah, and the line continues, you see. I'm very suspicious that the lines shouldn't be like... Oh, and there's another, yeah. Where's that?
Flight is there, still you can come here.
Uh-huh.
Or go there.
I see what you mean. Yeah, they move fast. Yeah, I've missed it.
Oh,
But it's okay. Yeah, so there we go.
Do you believe that this is a full-scale secret operation that includes not only the U.S. but Europe and the rest of the world?
Well, that's apparent because you can see the pictures from all over the world, and I get them constantly. Some areas are worse than others. The excuse for this is, number one, weather modification, number two, to save us from global warming, and number three, to save us from the terrorists. A lot of these programs, of which there are many patterns and which has been designated as wake vortex simulation carried out by NASA Langley Research Center, many of these operations and the patents go on to explain how if there is a biological attack by terrorists at some point, that these exercises and practices will, in a sense, save us with the spider webbery that comes down from the aerosol spraying, potentially gathering the chemical mass spray that could be sprayed on any given population. The problem with that is the terrorists don't have the means to deliver this. They don't have the access to deliver this over the American populace per se. And the only people who have been doing this, that is biological experiments on the American people, is the military themselves, which has been admitted from everything from Operation Shad to the spraying that happened in San Francisco, I believe back in the 60s and the 70s, that literally killed people.
Again, I may not be able to ascribe intent, but what I can say is that it is expected that there will be increased mortality as well as the potential of a huge host of unknown pathogens that we are subject to, and this is not based on speculation. There's a whole arena of biological research that we haven't even begun to touch on.
Could a strange substance found by a Southwest Arkansas man be part of a barium found in our sample?
At a community of the San Bernardino Mountains has a real mystery on its hands. The official explanation here is that jet contrails are causing strange lines in the sky.
What effects barium has in the body. Short-term exposure can lead to anything from stomach to chest pains. Long-term exposure causes blood pressure problems. Ryan addressed concerns by chemtrail researchers that barium could be meant to wear down a person's immune system.
You're talking about dominating our air supply without the human consent in a way that is difficult for many of us certainly to conceive, and certainly many of us refuse to accept it even in the light of sufficient and overwhelming evidence.
sunny, but freezing. Look at that, it's like a rainbow around it. Very weird.
Keď nevieš, aj sa pak sníte teraz dole. Nevieš, že sa mykáš mi foťáčik, vieš? Dole.
but they love the opportunity to do this, any excuse.
That's right. I wonder if it would do a spectacular peel. Oh, there's the other guy. His mate's just coming up to him. His mate's just coming up to him to set.
Bit of paint, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll do a running break. Peel off. Hope he doesn't peel off upwards because
yeah.
Yeah, itch and vintage. Thanks for a great photo. Yeah, if I give you control, I shall concentrate on the footage. Yeah.
So now that we have seen that it's possible, more like plausible, that they are indeed spraying chemicals, let us address why no one has said anything. The truth is, they have. But the individuals that talk about chemtrails are soon silenced, and if they are not, no one believes them anyways. If the mainstream media does not cover it, most people do not think it is real and simply dismiss it as a conspiracy theory.
There are the whistleblowers. I come from the belly of the beast. I was an interviewer, interrogator. I was a counterintelligence agent. I was a polygraph examiner, I was an internal investigator, and I was on and on and on. And so I know this system and I know it well, and then I experienced it personally. Why don't people come out in these secret programs that they know are illegal and unconstitutional. Why don't they come out and blow the whistle and tell people what's going on? Well, this is why. The U.S. government, every secret operational program that it has, forces the employee or coerces the employee, the person, into signing what is called a secrecy agreement, non-disclosure agreement. Now, back in the original days, the secrecy agreement was created to protect legitimate sources and methods, military technology and things like that. That was okay, that was fine. The secrecy agreement protected us when we went out on the field, because if they found out who we were, we wouldn't just be killed, we would have been tortured. So it protected our identities, protects the identities of troops in the field doing movements out during wartime. That's how it started. But it's been taken and it's been turned into a monster where the secrecy agreement is now being used as the ultimate tool of intimidation. Every employee that gets a job and obtains knowledge of these covert programs, the Air Force Geoengineering program, in my opinion, has to sign this agreement. What the agreement says is, if you disclose anything that you know about this program, you can be terminated or you can force criminal penalties. In other words, you can be put in prison. There's binding power, penalties, and threats for the secrecy agreement. That stops 99% of the people right there. Oh man, I'm not going there. I'll just look the other way. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want my life destroyed. Now, there is a massive, mammoth, complex, secret mechanism in the U.S. government. It's called the intelligence community. It is so powerful that not even the Congress or the Senate can control it. Matter of fact, it controls them. It does whatever it wants. They have these Senate investigations, and they'll come and they say, sorry, Senator, we can't tell you what we're doing because you don't have the agency clearance.
The death dumps, otherwise known as chemical trails, are being dropped and sprayed throughout the United States, in England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, and I have personally seen them not only in the United States but in Mexico and Canada. Birds are dying around the world. Fish are dying by the hundreds of thousands around the world. This is genocide. This is poison. This is murder by the United Nations. This element within our society that's doing this must be stopped. I happen to know of 2 of the locations where the airplanes are that dump this crap on us. 4 of the planes are out of Air National Guard, Lincoln, Nebraska, and the other planes are out of Fort Still, Oklahoma. I personally have observed the planes that were standing still in Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, at the Air National Guard. They have no markings on them. They're huge, bomber-like airplanes with no markings. This is a crime. Crime against humanity, crime against America, crime against the citizens of this great country. They must be stopped. What is wrong with Congress? This has an effect on their population and their people and their friends and their relatives and themselves. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with the pilots who are flying these airplanes? They're dumping this crap, this poison, on their own families. Somebody has to do something about it. Somebody in Congress has to step forward and stop it now. Thank you. I'm Ted Gunderson.
Aircraft making a condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale. You create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles, That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation trails.
The contrails, not the chemical, the contrails occur because of cold air, minus 30. It takes a high altitude, around 30,000 feet plus. There's carbon dioxide and water vapor in that exhaust. That turns to ice crystals, and that's what you see, the white stream behind it. Those white crystals of ice warm up, dissolve, and the smoke goes away. And it never lasts more than a minute. What we're seeing now, and I first could not believe it, and I started looking at the skies, and these are not normal. They're not natural. There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal. It's got to be some outside influence doing that. Thank you.
I'm here to give you testimony that chemtrails, they're not contrails, are indeed real. They're spraying almost every day. I watch the clouds and watch the spraying program going on. I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex, and they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs. They're dark operations. That's why they're not out in the media.
I look around and I see people are starting to look up and see this. Many times I've spoken about chemtrails, and I get this blank look on my face. What are you talking about? I'm saying, look up. As a pilot, before I fly, I look up. And so, boy, they're really out there working.
When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
There's a huge amount of aluminum being found because these sprays have aluminum, strontium, barium, manganese. And there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found. But aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum in the soil, which is not natural.
The metal compounds that are being used are environmentally dangerous. We need to be monitoring them. We need to be testing them.
Okay, these previous guys, I've watched exactly what they do, and yes, they are correct. I've seen exactly the same stuff, so ditto marks on those. You want some figures? Okay, latest water test, tested the rain. 13,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the rain in 2013. Normally, it should be 0. So 13,100 is pretty damn much, folks. It used to be 0, then it was 100s in the 2000s, and then since 2010, it's into the 1,000s and the latest 13,100. In the snow on Mount Shasta, pristine Mount Shasta, 61,000 micrograms per liter, 4 times the amount that is found in the soil up there. Where in the hell is this stuff coming from if it's not coming from the soil?
We have clouds in the sky we've never seen before. Almost every day I'm seeing clouds I've never seen before. And NASA has been even named a few of these new clouds. It's really interesting, but NASA is a corporation. I want you to know that.
NASA has also conducted a research program in what they call metallized fuels. We're actually putting aluminum oxide right in the fuel because it has 2 atoms of aluminum and 3 atoms of oxygen. So during the combustion process, it releases all that oxygen and dramatically increases efficiency, but it leaves the aluminum in the air.
We got things coming from sky down, and it's a huge, huge problem. Because as it comes down, what happens is a couple of things. Is that it actually is in our air, we breathe it. And as we breathe it, it's actually going to go up through our nostrils, into our brain, easiest access to our brain frontal lobe. The contaminants that have been identified, which already been mentioned, are aluminum. Aluminum is the #1 free radical generator to the brain to cause early apoptosis, which is early death of brain, and it begins to set off the scar tissue, which we call the amygdalin, which is part of the chemical matrix related to Alzheimer's.
I'm a neurologist practicing in Reading for 17 years, and in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increased, almost quadruple.
I became interested in chemtrails about 8 years ago when I was in Hawaii, and the Hawaiians are really being very vocal about it. I concur about the increasing number of Alzheimer's,
They have been able to take the aluminum and micronize it, which means it'll stay up longer. But it also means, and I don't know if any of you have noticed some metallic taste in your mouth when they're spraying, but you inhale that, it goes up through your cribriform plate and through your sinuses and into the brain.
As you heard, to spray nanoparticles, very small particles. These nanoparticles, they basically trigger a programmed cell death in the brain, and that is the ultimate path we see in Alzheimer's.
That's problem number one, because when we look at the Alzheimer issue, we say those are the old. The real problem is, and the real scare I have, is as I am a father of 2, I am a grandfather of 3. So the drama is our children. ADD started in the 70s. Autism was not on the radar. There was no documents, there was no information. It was 1 in 100,000 children. Today, what we have is 1 in 48 boys. I was part of the early group that was looking for aluminum in ADD and ADHD. And all of those children that started to develop those phenomena had high levels of aluminum. When we figured out protocols to detox them out, to free the body of those particular contaminants, what happened is that their brains came back. When we do this to the age, it doesn't come back as quick, but it will come back. But I'm seeing Alzheimer's in 56 years old. Back in the 70s, Alzheimer's when you were 80.
If you remember 8 to 10 years ago, there was this big move to get rid of aluminum from underarm deodorant because it would cause Alzheimer's. Look what they're doing to us now.
I want to give you a little bit of history on the background behind nanoparticles has been described before. A nanometer is 1/billionth of a meter. It's very small. In fact, if you have particles, say, that are 40 or 50 nanometers across, you can take and line 50 of them up next to a single red blood cell. These things are extremely tiny. They're pervasive.
The collapse and decrease of agriculture is something I worry about even more than the previous info about autism and Alzheimer's.
Believe me, I'm seriously concerned with what I'm watching. As a wildlife biologist, I've been watching the ecosystem collapse. When you lose all your stream organisms, when you have aluminum overload in your streams.
The last clip I have is from a Plain Truth's YouTube channel. It shows the news talking about 12 new clouds that recently have been discovered. These new clouds seem to be a direct result of chemtrails and other things the government is doing, including weather modification. Honestly, this is just where the rabbit hole starts. If you want to dig deeper, I suggest checking out a Plain Truth's YouTube channel. I will leave a link in the description below. God bless and happy truth seeking.
We are on cloud 12 because that's how many new types of clouds have been added to this historic update coming from meteorologists. I'm a little biased, right? Exciting stuff, guys. All right, so the new types include the Volatus or roll cloud, which has been designated as a whole new species. You can see it gets its name from this long horizontal tube-like shape. Next one up, we have the Cavum. The hole punch cloud, this big circular gap, is sometimes caused by aircraft taking off and landing. Very easy to see, right? Makes sense there. The hole punch cloud, this big circular gap, is sometimes caused by aircraft taking off.
And here we can see what Ms. Cutie Pie Meteorologist is so perky and referring to is these holes in the clouds here, folks. Just type in hole in the clouds and you'll see all the artificial weather. This is going on everywhere around the world. There's different applications. But you can see all the artificial weather being created by these ground-based and aerosol spraying devices to create artificial weather for many different applications.
Asparagus, these are gorgeous. It's actually my favorite. It's kind of looking like it waves while you're underwater. I mean, these are actually beautiful. I mean, check these out. And then finally, we also have the big surfer waves of the Fluxus clouds. These are actually caused by winds above flowing faster than the winds within the cloud itself. So you kind of get that shape. So beautiful, right? There's just a sample of the new additions that we have. Meteorologists, sky watchers, daydreamers, we're all geeking out, guys. What do you guys think?
I love that.
Favorite.
Who gets to name those things?
That's a great question. Wish it was me.
It's like, let me look that up for you.